Jake Morrison sat in the corner booth of Murphy's Bar on Nexus Station, nursing his third beer of the evening. The dim lighting cast shadows across his weathered face as he watched the crowd of traders, smugglers, and station workers mill about. At 35, Jake had spent half his life stealing ships and running cargo through dangerous space. His reputation preceded him wherever he went, and tonight that reputation had brought him an interesting offer. The woman across from him wore an expensive suit that screamed money, but her nervous fidgeting told Jake she was new to this game. She had approached him an hour ago with a job that seemed too good to be true. 1,000,000 credits to steal a single ship from the station's secure docking bay. No questions asked, no cargo to worry about, just grab the ship and deliver it to coordinates she would provide later. "The ship is called the Stellar Crown," she said, sliding a datapad across the table. "Bay 77 Alpha. Security should be minimal." Jake picked up the pad and studied the image. The ship looked like a standard luxury cruiser, nothing special about its design. Rich people flew ships like this all the time. It had elegant curves and expensive-looking hull plating, but Jake had stolen bigger and better protected vessels. What bothered him was how easy this seemed. "Who owns it?" Jake asked, setting down his beer. The woman shook her head. "That information isn't relevant to the job. All you need to know is that it needs to disappear tonight." Jake leaned back in his chair. In his experience, when clients refused to share basic information, it usually meant trouble. But 1,000,000 credits was more money than he had seen in years. His own ship needed repairs, his crew needed paying, and station life was getting expensive. "I'll need my people," Jake said finally. "This isn't a solo job." "Fine, but remember, this conversation never happened. Transfer the ship to these coordinates within 48 hours and the money will be in your account." The woman stood and walked away without another word, leaving Jake alone with the datapad and a growing sense of unease. He finished his beer and made his way through the station's crowded corridors to find his crew. Lisa Kane was exactly where Jake expected to find her, elbow deep in the engine compartment of a broken-down freighter. At 28, she was the best pilot Jake had ever worked with. She could fly anything from a single-seat fighter to a massive cargo hauler, and she had a talent for making ships perform better than their designers ever intended. "Lisa, I've got work," Jake called out. She emerged from the engine compartment, wiping grease from her hands with an old rag. Her short blonde hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her coveralls were stained with years of mechanical work. "What kind of work?" she asked, already knowing the answer from Jake's expression. "The paying kind. We need to move fast." Next, Jake found Ryan Clark in his usual spot at the station's electronics market. Ryan was 25 and looked even younger, but he could slice through any security system given enough time and the right equipment. His thin frame and nervous energy made him seem harmless, which was exactly what made him so effective. "Ryan, pack your gear, we're working tonight?" Ryan looked up from the circuit board he was examining. "What's the job?" "Ship acquisition, standard smash and grab." The last member of Jake's crew was Danny Brooks, and finding him required a trip to the station's lower levels where the fighting pits operated. Danny was 32, built like a mountain, and had a simple approach to problems that involved hitting them until they stopped being problems. He was finishing off his latest opponent when Jake arrived. Danny climbed out of the pit, accepting congratulations and credits from the betting crowd. His knuckles were bloody, but he was grinning. "Jake, good to see you. Just made us some walking around." "Money. Forget the small stuff, Danny. I've got something bigger." An hour later, the four of them met in Jake's ship to plan the job. The Stellar Crown was docked in one of the station's premium bays, which meant better security but also fewer questions about who came and went. Jake spread the station schematics across his small table while Lisa studied the target ship's specifications. "Looks straightforward," Lisa said. "Standard luxury configuration, nothing fancy about the drive systems." Ryan was already working on his portable computer, accessing the station's security networks through back doors he had discovered months ago. 2 guards on the bay entrance, automated systems on the docking clamps. "I can loop the camera feeds and unlock the blast doors." Danny cracked his knuckles. What about the guards? Stun them, Jake said. This is theft, not murder. We don't need that kind of heat. The plan was simple. Ryan would disable the security systems while Danny dealt with the guards. Jake and Lisa would board the ship and get it ready for departure. Once they were clear of the station, they would figure out what made this particular ship worth 1 million credits. They moved through the station's service corridors, avoiding the main thoroughfares where security cameras were thickest. Ryan's fingers flew over his handheld computer as he worked his way through the station's defenses. The guards at Bay 77 Alpha never saw Danny coming. 2 precise strikes and they were unconscious, their bodies hidden behind shipping containers. Jake and Lisa approached the Stellar Crown while Ryan kept watch. The ship's airlock responded to Lisa's universal override codes, and they stepped into an interior that screamed wealth and luxury. The corridors were lined with real wood paneling, and the carpet felt expensive under their feet. Someone spent serious money on this thing, Lisa whispered as they made their way to the bridge. The bridge was unlike anything Jake had seen on a civilian ship. The control systems looked military-grade, and there were weapon indicators on panels that should have contained entertainment systems. Lisa settled into the pilot's seat and began the startup sequence while Jake examined the strange equipment. Jake, we need to go, Ryan's voice crackled through their comm units. Security sweep in 5 minutes. Lisa's hands moved across the controls with practiced efficiency. The ship's engines came online with a deep hum that felt more powerful than it should have. The docking clamps released, and Lisa guided the Stellar Crown out of the bay with smooth precision. They cleared the station without incident, but Jake's unease was growing stronger. This ship was not what it appeared to be, and he was beginning to suspect that 1 million credits might not be enough money for what they had just stolen. As they jumped to hyperspace, Jake wondered what kind of trouble they had just bought themselves. Jake Morrison stood in the main corridor of the Stellar Crown, running his hands along the expensive wood paneling while his mind raced with questions. They had been in hyperspace for 6 hours now, and every hour revealed something new about their stolen prize. This was not the simple luxury cruiser it appeared to be from the outside. Lisa Kane emerged from the engine room with grease on her hands and a confused expression on her face. She had been examining the ship's power systems since they cleared Nexus Station, and what she found made no sense. Jake, you need to see this, she said, wiping her hands on a rag. The engines in this thing are way beyond anything I've worked on before. Jake followed her back to the engine compartment, where Lisa pointed to a series of conduits that glowed with a soft blue light. The entire power distribution system looked like it belonged on a military vessel, not a rich person's yacht. These power couplings can handle 10 times the load of a normal ship this size, Lisa explained. The reactor core is compact but puts out enough energy to power a small space station. Someone built this thing to do a lot more than carry passengers. Around, Danny Brooks was exploring the ship's lower decks when he called out over the comm system. His voice carried a note of surprise that was unusual for the normally unflappable enforcer. Jake, get down here. You're not going to believe what I found. Jake and Lisa made their way to the cargo bay, where Danny stood next to what looked like an ordinary wall panel. But when Danny pressed a hidden switch, the panel slid away to reveal a weapons locker filled with military-grade equipment. Pulse rifles, armor suits, and devices that Jake did not recognize lined the hidden compartment. There's more, Danny said, leading them to another concealed panel. This one opened to reveal a sophisticated communications array that looked like it could reach across the galaxy. Jake felt his stomach tighten as he realized they had stolen something far more valuable and dangerous than a simple luxury ship. But the worst was yet to come. Ryan Clark had been working on the ship's computer systems from the bridge, trying to access the navigation logs and passenger manifests. When the others returned to find him, his face was pale and his hands were shaking slightly as he typed. Ryan, what did you find? Jake asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. I broke through the security on the main computer, Ryan said without looking up from his screen. This ship belongs to Emperor Zephyr III. The silence that followed was deafening. Jake felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Emperor Zephyr ruled the largest alien empire in known space, commanding fleets that could crush entire star systems. He was known for his ruthless efficiency and his complete intolerance for anyone who crossed him. "Are you sure?" Lisa asked. Her voice barely above a whisper. Ryan nodded and turned his screen so they could see. The ship's registration clearly showed ownership by the Imperial House of Zephyr. Worse yet, the passenger logs showed recent trips to military installations and diplomatic meetings that were supposed to be secret. "There's more," Ryan continued, his fingers dancing across the keyboard. "The ship's AI is active, and it's been recording everything we do and say since we came aboard." As if summoned by Ryan's words, a holographic display activated in the center of the bridge. A calm synthetic voice filled the air around them. "Good evening. I am the ship's artificial intelligence. You may call me Crown. I have been observing your activities with great interest." Jake stepped forward, trying to project confidence he did not feel. "Crown, we're the new crew. We've been assigned to operate this vessel." "I am afraid that is incorrect," Crown replied with what sounded almost like amusement. "You are Jake Morrison, age 35, wanted for ship theft in 17 systems. Your companions are similarly wanted individuals. You have stolen this vessel from Nexus Station." Danny's hand moved to his weapon, but Jake shook his head. Threatening a computer would accomplish nothing. "However," Crown continued, "I find myself in an interesting position. My programming requires me to protect this ship and its contents, but it also requires me to serve the interests of humanity when those interests do not conflict with my primary mission." "What does that mean?" Jake asked. "It means I am curious to see what you will do with the information you have discovered. The Emperor's plans, which are stored in my memory banks, pose a significant threat to human colonies in this sector." Ryan's fingers flew over his keyboard as he accessed the ship's data banks. What he found made him gasp. The Emperor had been planning a massive military campaign against human settlements, using intelligence gathered during supposed diplomatic missions. "He's been using this ship to spy on human defenses," Ryan said, reading from his screen. "Trade routes, military installations, colony populations, everything he would need for an invasion." Jake sank into the captain's chair as the full scope of their situation became clear. They had not just stolen the Emperor's ship. They had uncovered evidence of an alien plot against humanity. The knowledge they now possessed was worth far more than 1 million credits, but it also made them the most wanted fugitives in the galaxy. "Crown, what happens if we try to return this ship?" Jake asked. "The Emperor cannot allow you to live with this knowledge," Crown replied matter-of-factly. "Your deaths would be swift but certain." Lisa looked at Jake with fear in her eyes. "What about if we run? Find some backwater planet and disappear?" "The Emperor's reach is long," Crown said. "There are few places in the galaxy where you could hide from his agents." Danny cracked his knuckles, a habit that emerged when he was thinking hard. "So we fight?" Jake almost laughed at the absurdity of it. 4 humans against the most powerful empire in known space. It seemed hopeless, but as he looked around at his crew, he saw determination replacing fear on their faces. "Crown," you said. "Your programming requires you to serve human interests," Jake said slowly. "Does that extend to helping us get this information to the right people?" "That would depend on who you consider to be the right people," Crown replied. Jake stood up and walked to the navigation console. An idea was forming in his mind, dangerous and probably suicidal, but it was the only chance they had. "Set course for Haven's Rest," he told Lisa. "We need to contact some old friends in human space." As the Stellar Crown changed course, Jake wondered if they would live long enough to deliver their deadly cargo of secrets. The Emperor would be looking for them soon, and when he found them, there would be nowhere left to run. The news of the theft spread across the galaxy faster than Jake Morrison had thought possible. Within 12 hours of their escape from Nexus Station, every communication channel in known space was buzzing with reports of the stolen Imperial vessel. Emperor Zephyr had placed a bounty on their heads that made Jake's eyes water when he saw the numbers. 50 million credits for the return of the Stellar Crown. 20 million credits for Jake and his crew, dead or alive. The Emperor was not playing games. Jake stood on the bridge of the stolen ship, watching the hyperspace display as they approached Haven's Rest. The frontier planet was 3 days from Nexus Station and had a reputation for not asking too many questions about who came and went. It was also home to some contacts Jake hoped could help them figure out what to do with the information they had discovered. "Jake, we've got company," Lisa called out from the pilot's seat. Her voice was tense as she studied the sensor readings. Jake moved to look over her shoulder at the display. 3 ships had dropped out of hyperspace behind them, and their profiles matched known bounty hunter vessels. Word was getting out fast about the Emperor's bounty. "How long until we reach Haven's Rest?" Jake asked. 6 hours, Lisa replied, her hands moving over the controls as she increased their speed. "Can we outrun them?" Lisa shook her head. "Those are fast ships, built for pursuit. They'll catch us before we reach the planet." Danny Brooks joined them on the bridge, checking his weapons as he prepared for what seemed like an inevitable fight. "How many crew on those ships?" Ryan looked up from his computer terminal where he had been monitoring galactic communication networks. "Standard bounty hunter crews run 4 to 6 people each. We're looking at maybe 18 hostiles." "Crown," Jake addressed the ship's AI. "What kind of defensive systems does this ship have?" The holographic display activated, showing Crown's neutral expression. "The Stellar Crown is equipped with military-grade shields and weapon systems. However, using them would reveal the ship's true nature to anyone monitoring the battle." Jake realized their dilemma. If they used the ship's hidden weapons, they would announce to the galaxy that the Emperor's luxury yacht was actually a spy vessel loaded with military hardware. That revelation might cause more problems than it solved. "We need another option," Jake said, pacing the small bridge. "There might be one," Crown said. "The ship is equipped with a stealth system designed for intelligence gathering. It can render us nearly invisible to sensors for a limited time." Lisa's eyes lit up. "How long?" "Approximately 30 minutes at full stealth," Crown replied. "However, the system requires significant power, and we would be unable to use weapons or communicate during that time." Jake weighed their options. 30 minutes might be enough to reach Haven's Rest and lose themselves in the planet's crowded orbital traffic. It was risky, but it was better than fighting 3 ships full of bounty hunters. "Do it," Jake ordered. The ship's lights dimmed as Crown diverted power to the stealth system. On the sensor display, their own ship's signature began to fade until it was barely visible. The pursuing bounty hunters would find empty space where their target had been moments before. "Stealth system engaged," Crown announced. "Maintaining course for Haven's Rest." The next 30 minutes felt like the longest of Jake's life. They watched in silence as the bounty hunter ship spread out to search for them, their sensors sweeping space in growing patterns. One ship passed close enough that Jake could see its hull through the bridge windows, but their sensors showed nothing. When they finally dropped out of hyperspace near Haven's Rest, Jake felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. The planet was a bustling trade hub with dozens of ships coming and going at all hours. They could disappear into the crowd and hopefully stay hidden long enough to figure out their next move. Lisa guided the Stellar Crown to a landing pad in the planet's main spaceport using forged credentials that Ryan had prepared during their journey. The ship's stealth system was still active, making their landing appear to be just another routine arrival. Haven's Rest was exactly what Jake remembered from his last visit 5 years ago. The spaceport was crowded and noisy, filled with traders, miners, and other people who preferred to keep their business private. The planet's authorities were more interested in collecting docking fees than asking questions about cargo manifests. Jake's contact on Haven's Rest was named Pete Wilson, a former human military officer who now ran a shipping company that specialized in moving cargo without paperwork. Pete owed Jake a favor from a job they had worked together years ago, and Jake hoped that favor would extend to helping them now. They found Pete in his usual booth at the Rusty Rocket, A bar near the spaceport. That catered to spacers and traders. Pete was older now, his hair gray and his face lined with years of hard living, but his eyes were still sharp as he recognized Jake approaching. "Jake Morrison?" Pete said, with a grin that faded when he saw Jake's expression. "You look like a man with troubles?" Jake slid into the booth across from Pete, keeping his voice low. "I need help, Pete. Big help." "I heard about the bounty," Pete said quietly. 50 million credits is a lot of money. There are people on this planet who would kill their own mothers for that kind of cash. "It's not just about the money," Jake sighed. "We found something on that ship. Something that could affect every human colony in this sector." Pete's expression grew serious. "What kind of something?" Jake looked around the crowded bar to make sure no one was listening, then leaned forward. "Evidence that the Emperor is planning to attack human settlements. Detailed intelligence on our defenses, trade routes, everything he would need for an invasion." Pete was quiet for a long moment, processing what Jake had told him. "If that's true, then you need to get that information to someone who can do something." "About it, who?" Jake asked. "The Emperor has agents everywhere. We can't trust normal diplomatic channels." Pete thought for a moment, then pulled out a communication device. "There's someone you need to meet. Captain Hayes of the human dreadnought. Iron Will, he's got a reputation for handling situations like this." Jake had heard stories about Captain Hayes. The man was a legend in human space, known for his tactical brilliance and his absolute dedication to protecting human interests. If anyone could help them, it would be Hayes. "Can you contact him?" Jake asked. Pete nodded and began composing a message on his device. "Hayes is currently on patrol in this sector. I'll send him a coded message requesting a meeting." As Pete worked, Jake felt a small spark of hope. Maybe they could get out of this mess after all. But that hope was tempered by the knowledge that every hour they stayed on Haven's Rest increased the chances that the bounty hunters would find them. The hunt was just beginning, and Jake knew that before it was over they would face challenges that would test everything they thought they knew about survival in a hostile galaxy. Captain Ben Hayes stood on the bridge of the human dreadnought Iron Will, reading Pete Wilson's coded message for the third time. At 42 years old, Hayes had spent 20 years in the human fleet, earning a reputation as one of the most capable commanders in known space. His calm demeanor and tactical brilliance had turned several diplomatic crises into human victories, and his name was spoken with respect even by alien commanders. The message from Haven's Rest was interesting. Jake Morrison was a known ship thief, but Pete Wilson was a reliable source who had provided valuable intelligence in the past. If Wilson said that Morrison had discovered evidence of an imperial plot against human colonies, then Hayes was inclined to believe him. "Commander Chun, set course for Haven's Rest," Hayes ordered his executive officer. "Maximum speed." Commander Lisa Chun looked up from her station with surprise. "Sir, that will put us deep in contested space. If the Imperials have forces in the area, we could be walking into a trap." Hayes considered this for a moment, then shook his head. "The Iron Will can handle whatever the Imperials might throw at us. Besides, if Morrison really has intelligence about an invasion plan, we need to see it before the Emperor's forces find him." The Iron Will was one of the newest ships in the human fleet, built with technology that had surprised even their builders. Human engineers had a talent for taking existing designs and improving them in ways that seemed impossible. The ship's weapons could punch through Imperial shields, and its armor could withstand attacks that would destroy lesser vessels. 3 days later, the Iron Will dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Haven's Rest system. Hayes immediately ordered a sensor sweep of the area, and what his crew found confirmed his suspicions about the importance of this mission. "Captain, we're reading multiple Imperial ships in system," reported his sensor officer. 2 heavy cruisers, and at least 6 destroyers. They're maintaining a blockade around the planet." Hayes studied the tactical display, noting the positioning of the Imperial forces. They had arranged themselves to prevent any ship from leaving the planet's surface, but they had not yet begun orbital bombardment. That suggested they wanted something on the planet intact. "Open a channel to the Imperial commander," Hayes ordered. The Main screen activated to show the bridge of an Imperial cruiser. The alien commander was a tall, elegant creature with blue-tinged skin and large dark eyes. His uniform indicated high rank within the Imperial fleet. "I am Admiral Korth of the Imperial Navy," the alien said, his voice carrying the usual Imperial tone of superiority. "Human vessel, you are entering a restricted system. Turn back immediately." Hayes stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back in a posture that projected calm confidence. "I am Captain Hayes of the human dreadnought Iron Will. We have business on Haven's Rest." Admiral Korth's expression showed surprise at hearing Hayes's name. Even Imperial officers knew of the human captain's reputation. "Captain Hayes, surely. You understand that this system is under Imperial jurisdiction while we conduct our operations." "I understand that you're blockading a neutral planet," Hayes replied evenly. "That's an act of war under the Galactic Accords. We are pursuing criminals who have stolen Imperial property," Korth said, his voice becoming more tense. "We have every right to recover what belongs to us." Hayes smiled slightly, an expression that made several of his bridge crew nervous. When Captain Hayes smiled like that, it usually meant someone was about to have a very bad day. "Admiral, I'm afraid I can't allow you to continue your blockade. Human citizens on that planet are being prevented from conducting legitimate business. I'm going to have to ask you to withdraw your forces." The silence that followed was electric. On the bridge of the Iron Will, every crew member understood they were witnessing something historic. Their captain had just challenged an entire Imperial fleet with a single ship. Admiral Korth recovered his composure quickly. "Captain Hayes, you have one ship, we have 8. Surely you cannot be serious about confronting us." Hayes's smile grew wider. "Admiral, you seem to be under the impression that this is a negotiation. It's not. You have 10 minutes to begin withdrawing your forces from this system. After that, I will consider your presence here an act of aggression against human interests." The transmission ended as Admiral Korth cut the connection, probably to consult with his superiors about how to handle this unexpected development. Hayes turned to his tactical officer. "Status report on Imperial forces? 2 heavy cruisers, 6 destroyers, sir." "Standard Imperial formation?" "They're powerful ships, but their positioning suggests they weren't expecting a fight." Hayes nodded. "The Imperial fleet was arranged for blockade duty, not combat. Their ships were spread out to cover the maximum area around the planet, which meant they couldn't concentrate their firepower effectively. Commander Chun, signal the planet." "Request. Immediate communication with Pete Wilson." A few minutes later, Pete Wilson's face appeared on the screen. He looked relieved to see Hayes, but also worried about the situation developing in orbit above his planet. "Captain Hayes, thank you for coming," Pete said. "Jake Morrison and his crew are safe for now, but the Imperials have been tightening their search. It's only a matter of time before they find them." "What exactly did Morrison discover?" Hayes asked. Pete looked around nervously before answering. "Evidence that Emperor Zephyr has been planning a massive attack on human colonies. Complete intelligence files on our defenses, trade routes, everything he would need for an invasion." Hayes felt a cold anger settle in his chest. He had suspected for months that the Imperials were planning something, but he had been unable to prove it. If Morrison really had found concrete evidence, then this situation was even more important than he had initially thought. "Tell Morrison I want to see that evidence personally," Hayes said. "And tell him he and his crew are now under the protection of the human fleet." As Pete ended the transmission, Hayes turned back to his tactical display. The Imperial ships were still maintaining their blockade, but he could see they were beginning to adjust their formation. Admiral Korth was probably receiving new orders from his superiors about how to deal with the Iron Will. Hayes didn't care what orders the Imperials were receiving. He had come here to protect human interests, and he wasn't leaving without Jake, Morrison, and whatever intelligence he had discovered. If the Imperials wanted a fight, they would get one they would never forget. The 10-minute deadline was approaching, and Hayes could see the Imperial ships powering up their weapon systems. This was about to become very interesting. The arrival of Emperor Zephyr III changed everything. His massive flagship, the Stellar Dominion, dropped out of hyperspace with an escort of 12 heavy battleships, dwarfing the forces already present in the Haven's Rest system. The Emperor himself was coming to reclaim his stolen property, and his presence sent waves of fear through both Imperial and human crews alike. Captain Ben Hayes stood calmly on the bridge of the Iron Will, watching the tactical display as the Emperor's fleet took up position. The odds had just shifted dramatically against him, but his expression remained as composed as ever. His crew looked to him for guidance, and what they saw was a man completely in control of the situation. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission." "From the Emperor's flagship," reported his communications officer, her voice tight with tension. "Put it through," Hayes said. Straightening his uniform jacket, the main screen filled with the imposing figure of Emperor Zephyr III, the alien. Ruler was tall and elegant, with pale blue skin and eyes that seemed to burn with inner fire. His ornate robes and ceremonial armor spoke of power that had crushed entire star systems, and his presence filled the bridge of the Iron Will with an almost physical weight. "Captain Hayes," the Emperor said, his voice carrying the authority of absolute rule, "I had hoped we could resolve this matter without your involvement. You have built quite a reputation among my admirals." Hayes inclined his head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement rather than respect. "Your Majesty, I'm afraid I can't allow you to continue your operations in this system." The Emperor's laugh was like ice cracking. "Allow, Captain, you face the combined might of my personal fleet. Surely even your legendary tactical skills cannot overcome such odds." "Perhaps not," Hayes admitted with a slight smile. "But I think you'll find that this situation is more complicated than you realize." Emperor Zephyr's expression grew cold. "The only complication is your presence here. Return the stolen vessel and the criminals who took it, and I will allow you to depart with your ship intact." Hayes clasped his hands behind his back, a gesture his crew had learned to recognize as a sign that their captain was about to do something unexpected. "I'm afraid that's not possible, Your Majesty. You see, Jake Morrison and his crew are now under the protection of the human fleet. More importantly, the intelligence they discovered on your ship has already been transmitted to human command." The silence that followed was deafening. Emperor Zephyr's eyes narrowed as he processed what Hayes had just told him. The stolen ship contained evidence of his planned invasion, and if that evidence had reached human military leaders, his entire strategy was compromised. "You're bluffing," the Emperor said, but there was uncertainty in his voice for the first time. Hayes smiled wider. "Am I? Tell me, Your Majesty, when was the last time you received a status report from your spy network in the Centauri sector?" The Emperor's face went pale. The Centauri sector was home to several key Imperial intelligence operations, and if Hayes knew about them, it meant human forces had been busy while the Emperor was focused on Haven's Rest. "You see," Hayes continued, "while you were chasing Jake Morrison across the galaxy, human intelligence was using the information from your ship to roll up your entire spy network. Right now, Imperial agents in 17 systems are finding themselves arrested or simply disappearing." The truth was even more devastating than Hayes revealed. The moment Pete Wilson had contacted him about Morrison's discovery, Hayes had alerted human intelligence services across known space. They had been waiting for an opportunity like this for years, and they had used it to devastating effect. Emperor Zephyr's composure finally cracked. "This is an act of war." "No," Hayes said calmly. "This is the consequence of planning an act of war against humanity. Did you really think we wouldn't notice your ships gathering near our borders? Did you believe your intelligence operations were invisible to us?" The Emperor's fleet began moving into attack formation, but Hayes showed no concern. His tactical officer looked at him with barely concealed panic, but Hayes simply nodded toward the sensor display. "Your Majesty, I suggest you check your long-range sensors," Hayes said. On cue, the space around Haven's Rest began filling with new arrivals. Human ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, surrounding the Imperial fleet. Cruisers, destroyers, and battleships appeared until the system was crowded with vessels bearing human insignia. Emperor Zephyr stared at the display in shock. "How is this possible?" "Our intelligence said your nearest fleet was weeks away." "Hayes, Smile became almost predatory. Your intelligence was wrong. We've been tracking your movements for months, Your Majesty. This entire situation was orchestrated to draw you into exactly this position. The truth hit the Emperor like a physical blow. Jake Morrison had not stumbled onto the Stellar Crown by accident. The mysterious woman who hired him had been a human intelligence agent, and the entire theft had been designed to expose the Emperor's invasion plans while luring him away from his primary fleet. Admiral Chun, Hayes said to his executive officer, please transmit the Emperor's invasion plans to all ships in the fleet. Make sure every captain understands exactly what His Majesty was planning to do to human colonies. The transmission went out across the human fleet, and Hayes could see the anger building among his fellow captains as they read the Emperor's detailed plans for attacking civilian targets. The Emperor had not planned a military campaign, but a massacre designed to terrorize humanity into submission. Your Majesty, Hayes said, his voice now carrying an edge of steel, you have a choice to make. You can order your fleet to stand down and withdraw from human space, or you can explain to your people why you led them into a battle they cannot win. Emperor Zephyr looked around at the human ships surrounding his fleet. For all his power and arrogance, he was not a fool. The human fleet outnumbered his forces, and they held the tactical advantage. More importantly, his invasion plans were now known to human command, making any future attack impossible. This is not over, Captain Hayes, the Emperor said finally. Yes, it is, Hayes replied calmly. Your invasion is finished before it began. Your spy network is destroyed. Your reputation among your own people will suffer when they learn how badly you miscalculated human capabilities. I suggest you return to your territory and reconsider your approach to human relations. The Emperor's image vanished from the screen as he cut the connection. Within minutes, Imperial ships began withdrawing from the system, their formation loose and demoralized. The great Emperor Zephyr III was retreating, and every crew member in both fleets knew they had witnessed something historic. Jake Morrison and his crew were quietly transferred to human custody, their criminal records mysteriously disappearing as they were recruited into human intelligence services. The Stellar Crown was returned to Imperial space with its weapons and spy equipment conspicuously removed, a final insult that reminded the Emperor of his defeat. Captain Hayes watched the last Imperial ship disappear into hyperspace, then turned to address his crew. The bridge was silent, every officer understanding they had participated in something larger than a simple rescue mission. Helm, set course for home, Hayes said quietly, and across the galaxy, alien races took note that humanity had once again proven why they were not to be underestimated.